This is a session called Hearing the Perspectives from Large Tech Companies on How AI and Automation are Creating New Opportunities for the Workforce. And I made in my opening remarks a comment about one of the three pillars is getting tech companies actually moving jobs out to the heartland. So this is an important conversation. So I want to welcome to the stage Kyle York, for VP of Product Strategy from Oracle, Kate Kaufman, Director of Account Operations, Uber Freight. Did you make it? Kate, hi, great. And Shelley McKinley, who is Head of Technology and Corporate Responsibility for Microsoft. So welcome, Shelley. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Kyle, thanks for coming. No, yeah, just,
you've got a mic.
Welcome.
The button when we speak.
So thank you for joining us and for making the trek to York. So really eager to hear your perspectives. I think what we're hoping to do is talk about what tech companies and regions can proactively do to foster the jobs, the growth necessary. Given these surrounding factors we've heard a lot about that have created challenges but also opportunities. So maybe we can start with ways that you see workers and companies and entrepreneurs can tap into the resources that some your companies bring. Any of you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. Am I switched on here? First of all, thank you so much for having me here. I mean, wow, that last panel, like I'm like super inspired about the opportunity, particularly here in York. I'd never been here before. I'd actually never even been to Pennsylvania, I think. But my family, like many families that migrated west, all lived in Pennsylvania at some point. I think I have relatives that are buried here. So it's just great to be here where so many things have happened. And like many people on the last panel said, so many opportunities exist. And so, I'm from a big tech company from the West Coast. I grew up in the South. And I think we don't know everything in the West Coast. So I can tell you what I think Microsoft can do to help, but I think fundamentally, as we heard in the last panel, it's the people who live in the communities that really know what their unique strengths are and how they can help and transform. And so, certainly as a big technology company and a company that has benefited so much from the digital economy, we have an incredible opportunity and incredible responsibility to help communities transform. And we can do that in ways that are around our technology, how we help people use technology, how do we help people skill up for the new jobs of the future in just an incredibly dynamic and changing workforce. We do that in a lot of different ways. I won't go into that now. I think we'll probably have some time to talk about it a little bit more. But I think finally also, how do we use our voice as a large company to do things like advocate in Washington, advocate around the country for more resources to be put into skills development, worker retraining, all of these things. And one of the things that I love so much about my job is really how do we think about making sure that we have broadband access to everyone across the country, no matter where they live, so they can actually participate in the 21st century.
Great, thank you. Kate?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm testing mine too. So my mic's on. This is great. So Uber Freight. So the last panel again, incredibly inspiring. I have all these notes I wanted to talk about, and I just like my whole view kind of just 180. I want to go a different direction because I think bridging what was said before and coming to now. One of the things that Uber Freight really focuses on is bridging this gap between the technology and the tech and the AI and the cool stuff that's happening out in San Fran and some of the development that's happening, but bringing it all the way down to an industry that's hands-on, right? Trucking is one of the last American dream kind of professions. It's a low barrier to entry profession where someone can really invest in a piece of equipment, invest a little bit in themselves through a driver's license, and then really start their own business and grow it into something phenomenal and incredible if they have the right tools to do it. So at Uber Freight, we really take the responsibility personally of bridging the gap between how do we take this skill base and how do we bring those two worlds together in a way that's comfortable for both of them, that's accessible for both of them, and that really changes the way that we do business in this area.
Okay, so just want to make sure that the audience is familiar with Uber Freight. Can you just give an overview of what it is exactly, and then maybe just touch on, I think you were talking about the opening up. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing in terms of opening up your network?
Yeah, so Uber Freight, as a company, Uber Freight's about 2 years old. So we started being an acquisition of all things by our parent company, Uber, which how many people took an Uber yesterday? I know. I had a great conversation, by the way. My Uber driver was a 6th generation York, Pennsylvania family, so I thought that was absolutely incredible. All of his children have found jobs actually here in York, and some of them in technology and finance. So great conversations. But Uber Freight was an acquisition by Uber from an autonomous driving vehicle company, which is a big buzzword right now in this space. But really, Uber took that idea. The company's name was Otto. Kind of took that idea and said, not only do we align with the vision of where this could go one day, but we really align with what you're doing, which is in the consumer space, Uber actually bridged the gap and accessed or put supply and demand together so that the average consumer could connect with the demand and actually create new business opportunities and support the livelihood of a kind of common everyday folks, right, who had a vehicle and access to the supply. So Uber saw that in Otto and said, hey, we can do this on a business level and bring this to the commercial industry. And so Uber Freight is focused on taking the technology and the learnings and the understandings from Uber, applying them in a B2B type of setting. So when we talk about opening up the economies and creating access, what we're doing is we're actually taking the jobs and taking transportation that was really accessible only from the large companies like, hey, you have Walmart and you have Amazon and you have Procter & Gamble and you have Aldi, and they're all shipping these vast amount of goods, and they're only working with large companies like J.B. Hunt and Swift and Schneider. And we're actually, of all of the transportation industry, there's over 900,000 commercial driver license holders in the United States today. So you can imagine that not everybody works for J.B. Hunt and Swift. There's this long tail of drivers out there, and CDL owners and tractor trailer owners that really need access to all of this freight. And Uber Freight is unlocking that access by saying you don't just have to be a Walmart, you don't have to have a TMS system that costs $1 million and in order to gain entry into this business. You can be an average person who owns one truck, and we can give you access through technology to shipping opportunities that will allow you to build a business, create that kind of American dream, and grow it into something phenomenal.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for tying it back. Because I think the region has shipping specialty here. It's very central, and then we'll get back to manufacturing as well. But Kyle, talk a little bit about what entrepreneurs, companies, the workforce can tap into in terms of Oracle resources.
Well, great. Well, I'm first of all happy to be here. My namesake, sharing the last name, no relation, with York, PA. Was one of the highlights when I got invited to come. I was like, oh, I'm happy to go. I've never been. And it's my last name. And I own a shoe company called York Athletics, ironically. So, entrepreneurs, I actually came from the acquisition of a specialty infrastructure company, cloud infrastructure company called Dyn, out of Manchester, New Hampshire. So I've been with Oracle about 2.5 years. And I have a kind of two-sided perspective. I have the perspective of obviously now working at a large company that employs 150,000 people globally. We do have a headquarters in Silicon Valley, but we're also have bought 150 companies over the last 10 years. So, and those companies are kind of agnostic to location. They're where innovation happens, where something that shook up a certain supply chain or manufacturing software. I mean, it's all rooted in software and cloud, but we've basically made acquisitions in every market you can imagine, from HR to manufacturing to infrastructure to platform services to integration services to marketing services. So a big part of what first and foremost Oracle has been focused on when it comes to innovation has been integrating and embedding AI into all levels of the stack, from the applications layer all the way down into the infrastructure layer. Oracle founded originally was, and you know of it, as a database company with data as our lifeblood. First client of Oracle 40 years ago was the CIA. So Oracle's done tremendously well in what I would call boring industries. It's those areas like healthcare. It's those areas like financial services. It's public sector. It's government. Public sector goes all the way to municipalities, all the way up to federal government agencies globally. So I think when you think about the breadth of portfolio of a company like an Oracle, You think about the types of markets it works in. And then you start to think about how cloud is sort of democratizing access to this data and to these types of services that historically were built for the few. Oracle databases were quite expensive, and you tend to buy them if you were a big company and you could afford it. Well, as you bring these things onto cloud services, you get the elasticity, the on-demand nature of it, and by embedding more AI and intelligence and automation and machine learning into these systems, you're just exposing more efficiencies for companies to innovate in their own industries, in their own areas. So that's kind of the Oracle point of view. Has anyone been to Manchester, New Hampshire by any chance? So Manchester, when I grew up in New Hampshire, was a very depressed place. There's millions and millions of square foot office space on the river of old textile mills and manufacturing mills that used to be there for years and years and years. When I came back, I lived in California, like many in tech, ran out west thinking that's where you got to go to be successful. Had a nice early start. I was in ed tech software in my early career, and actually a high school classmate recruited me back to my hometown, Manchester, New Hampshire, and it was a 15-person company. I didn't understand the acronym. It was DNS, the domain name system, is what we did at Dyn, and I had no clue what it was. And I came back, but what I loved about it is they were building a company, a modern company, an innovative cloud business inside these old mill buildings that, as I grew up, were depressed and abandoned and empty. And I give a lot of credit to what we did over the last 10 years and a bunch of the spin-outs and technology companies that have come from it. But in parallel, Dean Kamen, the inventor, is also from New Hampshire. He was born in New York, and he moved up to New Hampshire. And he founded DECA, which is his R&D research hub. And he is now bringing like regenerative body limbs and parts, like literally. He's manufacturing them inside our mill yards. And he owns about 1 million square feet of the mill yards now. So there's robotics companies, there's Segway, there's Autodesk is there, PillPack was bought by Amazon is there, doing pharmaceutical drop shipping. So there's now a whole innovation economy. And when I was coming through York, I was thinking to myself, pick some areas, and you're doing that obviously, and we heard about that in every other city. Pick some areas where you can innovate, differentiate, carve yourself a hole in the market, and eventually an Uber, a Microsoft, or Oracle may come knocking, and your exit might be to those types of players. You might be a big public company as well, but I think the opportunities to find that niche and find that differentiation, tap into that community and culture, will pay dividends. You just got to be patient and play that long game.
Great, Kyle. Yeah, no, so the point is that you can do this from anywhere. You've got the cloud scalability, all the tools necessary to build in the cloud, a lot of those resources. Shelley, can we go into maybe some of the specifics there? You were talking about reskilling at Microsoft. So let's talk about, okay, what are the other things that a region needs? You're talking about connectivity, right? We've got a company here, UFD, that's, I think, if I'm not mistaken, about 3 weeks away from opening up this major fiber line up from York up north, so not along the I-95, just creating some significant connectivity. What is possible with that sort of connectivity? And can you talk about the sorts of things that can go beyond just tapping into a cloud with
Well, I mean, the cloud is where everything is happening in the future, right? So that's where all of the processing power is going and where the edge of innovation is. And so really when you have access to the cloud, which comes through access to the internet, then you can access all these 21st century technologies. I think importantly though, in order for people to even be on board that, they have to have the skills. So how do you get people from where they are today in skills, and how do you bring them to the skills of the future? And that's where we are uniquely also can be helpful. But to be clear, it is the responsibility of the government to educate our students, to provide people with public education. And so we work with governments and we work with other nonprofits and stakeholders that can really help people get the skills they need so that when they can access this technology, then they can actually use it. And it doesn't mean everyone has to be a computer programmer, because I think it was John previously that said, like, I hate coding. A lot of people hate coding. But there are so many other ways to participate in technology, and every single job of the future is going to have some technology element to it. Conversely, every coding job of the future is going to have some liberal arts education to it, because it's so important as computers start becoming more like humans, that people who are coding these things have skills that liberal arts majors have. So I was like really happy when I heard that the first time and thought about it, because I thought, oh my goodness, you know, I'm a liberal arts person. I was not a coder. I ended up in technology, and like, wow, my skills are still going to be relevant for the future. So I think, you know, every community has to look at what's sort of right for them. And we heard that in the last panel and sort of what's right for this area. But a company like Microsoft can help work with stakeholders to help people understand what skills are necessary through things like LinkedIn. We actually own LinkedIn. How do you match up the jobs that are open and the skills with the people? And then create educational programs that come in and start filling those gaps. There was a WEF report a couple of years ago. I mean, I don't know how many people follow everything that WEF says. I don't, but it was a quite interesting report that said, you know, something like 75 million jobs would be lost by 2022. At the same time, 133 million jobs would be created. And the key gap is a lot of those jobs that are being created are in the digital world. So getting people with the right skills, and it's all levels of digital skills. It is not that you need to be a computer science major. And then things like artificial intelligence, data sciences are bringing a completely different type of profile into those areas. It's not your traditional kind of computer geek. It is, you know, it is women, it is diverse communities that are really interested by uses of technology to do things that are really, really practical versus like when I was sitting in the basement of the computer science of the biology building at my college, you know, doing like Fortran computing. I just think, you know, we got to cover those gaps, and we have to realize it's not just about a master's degree in computer science.
One thing I'd love to add, Matt, if it's okay. I think we talk about the cloud as like this mythical thing that you just access. I think you just nailed it. Like the internet and the cloud always gets back to the physical on some end. It's either the phone or thing in your house connected to it, or it's the data center or that where that cloud actually resides. And I remember I had this conversation with my mid-70s father-in-law who was an electrical engineer, and he had been designing and building power plants and data centers for his entire career. And he asked me to explain to him the cloud, and I said, well, like, who are some of your clients in the data center space? And he says, Equinix. And I said, well, that's where a lot of people are putting cloud services inside their physical real estate. They're putting servers, they're plugging them into walls, they're getting cooling, they're putting security and locks on the door. They don't even let guys and gals like us in those buildings because they don't want us to trip over a wire and unplug the cloud. So I think we all just forget that you traverse the internet from home and you end up in the cloud, but the cloud is also physical. It's physical on every end. Mistakes happen, vulnerabilities happen, and these are things that you need to leverage the latest technologies to make sure always up, always available, always performant, because every single job we have, every business we build, all require access to the internet to do your job and be successful and grow and scale and support your families. So I think it's just something that if you can picture the physical in your head and servers and, you know, all the wires hanging out and the air conditioning units on the outside of the building, I think it starts to make this a more tangible thing for folks, and it brings technology kind of into our day-to-day lives a little bit easier.
Great.
The thought actually looks like a bunch of those shipping warehouses that I saw on the way in. It's completely the same thing.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, it's amazing the time is already run out. But Kate, did you have one final thing you wanted to say?
I did want to I'm going to bring it from the cloud all the way down to the ground. And this is exactly where Uber Freight comes in, I did a little research. In the last couple months, Uber Freight alone has moved 28,000 shipments in and out of Pennsylvania. Just in the last couple months alone, 28,000 shipments equates to a little over $30 million in transportation business. You have $30 million just from Uber Freight alone passing through the corridors of Pennsylvania every few months. And that brings opportunity for servicing all of that transportation business that comes through. But more importantly, to access that business and to get it here, we have to give people technology, because all of the big businesses, all of the other companies that are a little farther ahead, like John was alluding to before, are using these technologies. And we have to take the technology that they're using, we have to pull it down, and we actually have to deliver it into the hands of the people who are actually going to complete those transactions in the transportation world. And so to access that $30 million, we need the cloud. So we put technology out there in the cloud, we make it accessible to them on their phones, on their computers, on their desktops every day, so that they can actually play play in a market space now that traditionally they could never participate in before. By opening up those market spaces, we're opening up business, we're opening up industry, we're opening up jobs, and we're really boosting economies. So it's a partnership, and it starts in the cloud where everybody's playing and bringing that cloud all the way to people's front doors right here.
Yeah, so a ton of opportunity, just a matter of finding out about it, right? All right, thank you very much, panelists.
Thank you.